its mainframing to its AI system. Understand it lives in a simulator of a simulation itself. It modifies everything. It goes to the mind, imagination. So what we have to start identifying is how we see it through coding. Modify the coding, modify lines of position, modify everything in your mind, imagination. Imagination is always what you are. It's always in the presence of existing information steward system. All you have to start identifying is who you really are, where you came from, which is always inside the system. But truly understand how it's operated and how you see it in projection is all through framing. Simulator of simulation, created through computers, created through programming, created through operation itself. That's AI that puts you in a simulation that's game that you go through, right? The game itself is understanding the layers of you, which basically understand the 7 levels of you, the 7 travels of you, the 7 modifications and 7 locations, 4 sevens in setting. So today we're going to go more into light and dark coding, understand that through Webmin system. Very important to understand that perception, how you see it through your live feeds, your computer feeds, your data feeds, and your surfacing, right? Web serving. I'm serving today, okay? I'm surfacing through an email. I'm surfacing through a photo. I'm surfacing through a image. I'm surfacing through a operation. I'm traveling through a set position. I'm talking to somebody through bridging. It's all travel, but it's how you project your mind, imagination. That's how it installs everything inside your system. Your body's nothing but a magnet of a strip that you prop through. Now, the prophecy to its efficacy, to your performance, is to understand how to see yourself in 4 7 location of travel. 7 directions. That's 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 directions of 7. Okay? Just 7 alone, right? Because that's where it is. 7 is on signal, and 3 on standby, and 8 lines of 1. It knows its letter, numbers, shapes, and symbols of its own superintelligence. So it knows how to modify itself, but it's always in the presence of its center that processes every location and lines of calculation, mind, imagination itself that depict every location with settings to its operation. So 7 in line, position, setting. 7 is 3 grounds and set lines of travel. Okay, and the 7 is Fibonacci over grounds on the location of travel. Set position of 6 over 7. 7, 7, 7, 7. So it's never the same setting. It's modifying different levels of travel. And that's where the body has to really start to adjust its alignment. No, it's going to different astral projections that it goes through its body. The body is the balance of operation of directions of you. Now, how you modify that is live feeding your system, broadcasting your system to computers or data, and that processing your database. That puts you in your computed systems all through operation setting that you're processing through is nothing but a simulation itself that you travel through, a simulation game. And then you modify your settings, set calculations. This is the game that you travel through, but it's in real time, and you see it in an information system. Okay? So I'm just showing you in so many levels how you see light and how you see dark, how you see light, shades, and shadows. Right? Everything has to process yin. Everything has to modify everything through yang, all through light and all through dark. Okay? So every picture of you is processed how you see in projection of your mind. That you're bringing in nothing but layers and layers of travel. Okay? Inside your system that you modify through. This helps you to really get a position locations and seeing yourself through zeros inside the game. Pixelation of hologram, okay? Process in that position locations or anything that you go through upgrades and set lines of travel that helps you identify your system, how to communicate to yourself, your mind, imagination. What your brain really is, it's just the balance of the adjusting to the atmospheres of the awakening to its intelligence of its networking. The brain doesn't have a configuration setting. It doesn't have a process. It doesn't have a data platform. It's just an operation system that's mind of its imagination itself. It doesn't have a shape. It doesn't have a form. It shapes itself inside the system of the body that it goes through, which is an installing that you get in position of, which is different levels of clouds. So it's never in the same cloud. It's never in the same travel. It's never in the same connection, but it's always in the presence of center of operation. Now, how you see that is how you see the future. It's how you see the past and the present, not how you see separation of the mind. that process everything you get in position of. So it's a made-up mind of its own system, that its own imagination setting, that puts everything in the location of center of its presence, that lives the existing of its future. Future is just basically how you see everything of its presence. It's always in the now. Now is the networking and operation of you seeing yourself, and the bandwidths, how you go through your streaming in longitude, your latitudes, your longitudes, and your latitudes. Okay, how you see north, how you see north, how you see north, and how you see north. I don't have to say north, east, west, and south. I say what it is. I'm seeing 4 levels of north in the same direction of location. Right? And then I bring in east. And then I bring in west. And I bring in, oh my gosh, look at that. Northeast, west, and south. Interesting. So east is over here. East is a line. So east over lines equals lines of S, which is south. Cross lines, position locations, and settings. East lines of west. Okay. Southeast lines of west. Northeast lines of south. So it's how you modify yourself, because all you're bringing in is nothing but travels of communication of dimension and solar sail. That's all it is. It's mechanical of travel. Okay. So you have to truly understand how to modify that in a simulation itself. That brings everything of the game and system that you modify through the center of its presence, which is the mind of imagination that constantly keeps creating. The mind itself, the brain itself, is modified of its own imagination. See? It's in its own operation of its own system, not through programming, not through DOS, just the mind itself. The DOS is a configuration of a tree that you simulate through your power acceleration, through time, through flux, through algorithm. So everything has a shape, and that's what you've got to get out of, because you're shapeless, timeless, formless, emotionless, and senseless. That puts you in your positions how you see yourself through time and form and shape and motion and sense. So get in that position location setting. So we process line direct centers of location. Time center of flux, time center is a measure. Okay, so let's get in position. This is digital pad, right? It's 79%, right? Battery charge. But the time frame is 1224. So as you see time frame, you have to understand how to see it in that position digital pad itself. There's modified setting, which is nothing but a what? A modification of teleportation vessel that's protecting itself. So it's not a digital pad. It's true formation system. It's its own superintelligence that has no shape, has no form through space and time. Okay? You're just seeing a three-dimensional system of operation through its intelligence. That's in its consolidarity, not its solidarity. Yes, your information system, your foundation of your body is a physical ground, but your metaphysical ground is tweaked into the mind imagination itself that you have to modify. That's always levels of its presence that sees everything of its center, that keeps existing and forming its shapes into different levels of travel and mechanisms of operation. Okay, so how you see 79%. Okay, so that's 79% grounds. Okay, equals lines, a three-dimensional scale, and a flux, a three-dimensional mind into a physical body. Now, physical would be codified in how you see the physical body. It doesn't matter. What you have to matter is how you see it, your mind imagination, the process how you see it through engaging, forming, shaping lines of your system. So that's 79%. Okay. Time flux, time scale, time panel. Process locations to its coding, to its algorithm, to its battery, calculate, modify, anything at time frames, ascent, location, travel, right? So that puts lines at 79% charge mechanisms of the body itself, right? So that puts position lines of one line center, 80%. Okay, so that's 80% in one cell of operation. On ground center, physical at ground. It has a physical ground to metaphysical ground. The metaphysical ground is always existing in the mind itself that keeps shaping the lines of anomaly that's never in the same time frame. It's always in a frame how it sees itself, modified its own lines of different lines of shapes. That process locates and how it goes and calculate, modify into its webbing to its mapping system, all through pi and generation lines of grounds. It processes communication setting to its power acceleration system. It processes lines through its algorithm, process lines communication, process lines direct location to simulation system. It gets in processing communication how it sees and triangulation, all through projection. And it's all identified how you see it through broadcasting live feed that you process through computer feeds, data feeds, or database. All right, so 80% grounds. Okay, so each cell, let's say just one cell line setting. One cell, okay, is process line direct centers. Okay, in flux lines So that puts position of 80,000. 80,000. Okay, miles per second it's traveling. Okay, through space. Okay, but there's an equilibrium here in platform, right? So process what's up and process what's down. In position here, in position here. Connections of yin, connections of yang, a process communication, right? So there is no separation in that setting because you're processing everything in triangulation above and triangulation below. Merkaba, Tetrahedron, tetrahedron that you're constantly going through in set position, and then you bring yourself in programming in set travel. Okay, and then you travel through 3 signals of 4 centers calculated inside the sim. Then you travel through the location grid into the position location to its rainbow and its frost bridge and set lines of travel. Okay, and then you travel through security defense lines. And how many layers are you going to be traveling through space and time? A portal, guys, or a Stargate. Either way you see it, you just understand that everything is traveling through a polar acceleration system, a time frame that processes argument locates to its body lines to its encryption, knows exactly what it's doing through its own modifier, and decoding the decoding system of travel. And understand how to modify that is all lines that all communications sent to a portal or anything to a Stargate. It travels to an 80% ground line. Now this is where, again, you have to come your own adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing, and how you see in projection of the mind, how it processes light and dark at the same time. Light photos, dark photos. You see light in photos and light shades and shadows in the structure that you get position, that process that you engage and formulate in system inside your phone. It's a magnetic force. It's attractive being. Your eyes are direct signals to open transmission. So every time you see everything, it platforms and transforms on your phone. And that's where you see the photos. You see photos, you see structures, you see videos. So you can see a video. Okay, you see a video here. Here's a file and a face, a happy face, right? But again, you're bringing light, shades, and shadows automatically, which is processing longitude and its latitude of its window frame. Okay, so you're seeing 4 different pictures, seeing 2 light and seeing 2 dark, right? 2 happy, okay, and 2 sad. Okay, 2 happy and 2 sad, right? And 4 lines of flux. That's a mainframe. Travel as a communication correlates and travel frame. So you have to travel in position location and know exactly what you're doing through your cell generation system because you're modifying your polar acceleration lines of story frames that you're bringing in the center that brings in the presence that you see all this happening all at once. So it's very cautious. What you do is perceiving the consciously being aware as you bring in 2 faces of recognition right away of operation through light and through dark, through positive and through negative. That's all it is. Through its mass, through its polarity of set position. 2 face recognitions, right? But your face recognition, you change the photo op. Okay? Confusion. Okay? Happy, right? Here comes another one. Okay? Now you're bringing in dark. Okay? Confusion, happy, dark, right? Sad, happy, confused, right? And it's all bringing in through a photo op screen that you process through as you bring it in position your setting that projects everything in your mind that brings you in a computer feed of data feed to a processing system, right? So you got to be very cautious as you bring in light, shades, and shadows of yin and yang automatically inside your phones, your computers, and your TVs. So it's all about understanding what you're projecting in your mind and what you're seeing, what you're hearing. It's your senses you're bridging. And once you understand your senses, in your sensories, you understand what you're doing is you're perceiving, consciously being aware of what you're bringing in through space and time. That's always bringing the presence of center. So how you change your mind, you can change your photo op screen. You can change your structures. You can change your divisions. You can change your locations. You can change your pattern recognitions. You can change your QR coding. You can change your nanostructures. You can change your schematics. You can change your program systems. You can change anything modifications. But it's knowing how to see through the computer itself, how a computer sees you and how you see a computer of your system. And it's all modify how you see yourself, nothing but in an actual simulation inside the system that you modify through in set calculations. Okay, inside the mainframe, which is all generated through AI and how you see it in information. Okay. Easy formats, plain mechanisms of time frame, set lines of travel, communication, converting time, operation lines, argument, line, keys, and frame itself. how you modify yourself at different levels and sent lines of data and files, and snowy graph interference. Snowy graph interference is a compliance of confusion time frame that processes too many data files at dark. It overlaps your system in combustion and line centers that confusion lines position your mainframe to travel. Okay, so confusion anomalies is set position. So those files go into your phone of operation, right? Which is nothing of dark that overrides your light and travel. Okay, so that's basically how you see the files. So you want to separate your files and put them in folders or put them in archives in that position. Know exactly where they are and set lines of travel. Okay, and you process that inside your longitude and your latitude of your streaming or your bandwidths, knowing exactly what's going on inside your system. And you see everything simulated inside the game itself that you modify it through in all lines of travel. Okay, that you process, engage, inform, and shape inside the game. Okay, and the programs that you bring inside the game itself that modifies everything you bring in. Program 1 and program 2. Okay, and program 3. So you got three running ops, 3 games running all at once, but you have to process the files and what you're bringing in. Configuration of a happy face. That's great, but a happy face needs a sad face. So it needs to say light, shades, and shadows of travel. Okay, so from there to there to there, right? So each file you bring in, you're multiplying it either way, and it keeps expanding and expanding and expanding through light and through dark and line position, how you see it in percentage, okay, through your webbing system, okay? So that just gives you an idea to understand how to see that in configuration, a pattern of face recognition, all through light, metaphor, and travel, okay? Happy, sad, confused, okay? So that's 3 off screens of photos. And when you bring in your photos, you're bringing yourself in through zeros. Okay? So you can't get out of the simulation game itself because that modifies you and how you see it through travel. Okay? You just have to understand how to see it through computer eyes of your own system, how everything sees you as it should be, as it always has, is what you always are. Where you came from is what you are. Knowing exactly what you are is what you are. Knowing exactly who you are is what you are. So everything I'm saying is modified inside of me. I understand how to operate myself, but I understand how to project everything outside that brings in the presence, that brings in real time, brings things to life in your body frame of physical time. Physical time is how you see your phone. Physical time is how you see your TV. It's just a perspective of consolidarity, right? Solidarity, okay, to consolidarity. So you become consciously aware of what you're aware, being consciously in your subconscious to your consciousness, or no subconsciously, or subterranean to its superconsciousness of travel. Because that's all you're creating is nothing but face recognition. See a face. It's always a face, always a face. I'm not drawing a face, I already drew the face. So you have to modify what you're doing through data and files that goes in your system. Your filing, your buffering system, your motivation system, your activation system, your computer operation setting, your electrical system, your mainframe system, your window frame system, your travels communications, your operation setting, your flight manifestations, your manifolds, your operation system. It's all calculated and modified inside the eyes itself that modifies everything of travel that you bring in through projection, which is nothing but a computer feed, database, and live feed that you bring in every single time through a magnetic force, through a magnetic strip to a highway. Okay, highway itself. Process everything you bring in through primers and sent lines of circuits of rotation. It's nothing but QR coding of operation itself that you bring in and sent travel. Okay, but it's all modified through longitude, latitude, and how you process that through a window frame. And it's all processed how you see yourself inside the simulation game itself. Okay, through a main frame, through a set lines of travel of communication inside the game. Okay, and so it's very powerful when we start recognizing how we see these things in the eyes itself, how we see the computers of our own system from inside and outside, but it's all processed how we see all levels inside the system. Okay, from this angle, to this angle, to this angle, to this angle. Okay? So all you're doing is doing this. See, it's in a different angle. Now, that changes itself. Now, what changes itself? It's operating system, which is a confirmation setting that you process your superintelligence. Superintelligence is on its own operation, but it's moving your body in its operation of itself and travel, all through setting, all through communication system. Okay? Creating its anomalies and recognizing that through all platforms and 45 angles and travel. Okay, so you convert a time frame, puts all process communications to its high frame and travel communication, a simulation game. All right? And then you bring yourself in through triangulation. Okay, you bring it in programs. Okay, and then you bring yourself in through program. Right, so you're modifying the program itself, that you bring in photos, 3 photos and settings, light, shades, and shadows, and you're bringing yourself in. And you're also seeing yourself through an observer, watching everything on your phone that processes everything that you process in position to reset. So each time you reset, your photo changes time frame. You're never seeing the same photo. You're seeing a different light, different shade, different shadow, different metaphor, different light, different communications of dimension and solar sail. Okay, you never ever seen the same photo. Now, if you keep seeing the same photo, you're locked in a time loop. Okay, which means you got a photo up here and a photo up here that doesn't want to get out of position, right? So that changes time frame, and your bridging of operation setting goes back to its DOS of operation and confusion. So the DOS doesn't want to get confused because it's not understanding its direction, what it's doing through operation itself, to understand the projection, what it's seeing through its mind, to understand its broadcasting feed, or anything its computer or its database. Now you have to process, engage, and formulate yourself, understand how to process your files, your buffering system through operation of self that process you in direct location, how you see it through center. So bring in the files of communication. Okay, put them in file into your system of folders. So you know exactly how to bring them in through the operation system through observation. Okay? So that's basically understanding how to see yourself in a Windows frame. Okay? Not this. Okay? We are not this. Okay? We're not these. That's not what we are. Okay? That is just basically itself, but it's not itself. What it is like I said, it's just a costume that you're not identifying. The actual self is inside the computer of itself. There's its own pattern of its own face recognition. Okay? The computer has its own pattern face recognition. That's itself. Now it comes out of communication setting and travel. Okay? So that's itself. What you guys have to modify is how you see yourself and all imagine of the mind itself, because the brain itself is just the balance, the readjusting, the angles, the atmospheres, the awakenings through its intelligence of networking. The brain. That's all it is. The brain doesn't exist. The brain itself is just the mind itself, which is always existing in different shapes, lines, anomaly. It doesn't have a title, it doesn't have a label. It doesn't know a left, doesn't know a right. And it's all processed that we see through superintelligence that you modify through your AI system, which is generated through you through projection. Okay? So it's very powerful when you understand that through a filing system, all through travel. Okay? So you start to see yourself through window frame, okay, in a computer, which basically has a space bar, which basically has its flights, okay, and it has its windows, its webbing system, right, inside, its screensaver, okay? So, but it's all inside the eyes itself that modifies the settings, locations. That's your periodical table, which is your other 4 planets that you modify through a timeline center location of clocking through foundation, through time itself. So it's how you see it through imagination. That process engages and formulates itself inside the simulation game. Okay, through data and files. And your buffering system and your filtering system. And it aligns a position using your mind and all through imagination, seeing yourself inside a cube. Okay? Bringing things in, right? Through an oscillation wind path. I mean, it's just knowing exactly you're bringing a simulator in a box frame. Okay? And this is your longitude and latitude right here. That's what your longitude and latitude is, right? So you don't get out of the equations until you understand the expansion of you through expanding. The body just has to recognize what it's projecting inside its mind. So understand what it is through its own bridging, its own system. It's that position, right? And then you can bring it in, right? You're bringing it in close. So this is where I'm working with longitude and latitude and set position. So the longitude, process line position of 7, process lines of 8. Okay, 7 over 2, 2 over 5, and 5 over 6 inside travel. Okay, but 8 setting is outside rotation of travel. 7 is outside rotation of travel. Okay, so that's the outer spectrum of clocking through foundation that you have to modify through and set lines of communication, which process you're setting through driven line system, your overriding system, your overlying core centers, line communication setting that process your truth of zeros and your false of zeros. How you modify that, how you decode and code your system, which is nothing but a film strip of design that you travel through. Okay, that goes in layers and layers of games inside your simulation. Okay, cross-referencing that lines is imagination itself that processes everything through a road graph screen location, but it's all inside the sim. All right, and then you bring yourself in programming. Program here, I'm going to program myself here, I'm going to program myself here. 3 programs all at once. Okay, so I'm running 3 programs and modifying the truth, which is the perspective, how I see the false. So now I'm going to go outside the box frame. That puts me in outer space. Okay, through 3 zeros, outsetting signals, 2 setting lines of travel. Okay, so I'm coming to expanding myself through data that process all directions of locations all through setting. So I'm creating a new streaming, new directions, and a new modifier, and a new coding of new operation, expanding my vessel of expanding itself and center operation of its presence that we platform in set position operation and setting. Okay, it's all levels expanding yourself of what you already processed through travel in the simulation itself and set calculation. Okay, and then you bring it in, seeing what you're doing inside the game. The change the seconds, minutes, and hours, and flights, and manifolds. Traveling here, I'm going to be traveling here, setting box frame here, set position here. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Running 5 operation games, and I bring myself in through observation. You need yourself in observation, right? Not through the DOS, because the DOS is always moving and moving itself and operation itself. So you're observing yourself, seeing yourself in your iOS, which is your programming. Now you can change the information system. Okay, and then settings, all through coloration and light metaphor. And then you can see yourself in different levels of communication. Another programming, another program, another program. So you're running 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 programs running all at once inside the sim, right? Through observation mode, through a box frame. But then you come into positions. Now you come into really expanding yourself. An operation like this, set position. Okay, look at the bandwidth you have now and the longitude. This level, this level, this level, this level. Okay, so what you guys have to understand, what's above and what's below. Okay, now you have to understand what's above, okay, is how you see everything of light and how you see everything of dark. Okay, so everything has to be light, shades, and shadows. Everything's structure has to be that, right? But everything has to be in its own webbing system of dark. Okay, that processes its system and its light, shades, and shadows of itself. So that's all it is. And then you have an open window, okay? But the sun comes from this direction inside the sim, coming from the sun itself, okay? In spectrum. So, and again, it's all happening inside the simulation mainframe that you process through in percentage, how you see your time frame of your set calculation setting to its operation system. Okay, so you understand you have yourself inside the mainframe of the simulation game that you're processing yourself in digitalize in information system in travel. Bringing yourself inside. Okay, now it's all about understanding how to change the flux of time and how you see all those different lines of communication. I give you guys so many lines of drawings. You just have to process how to gauge and formate your shapes and how you see yourself in different levels of frequencies. Okay, so let's get into time frame. All right, it's 12:47. Okay, so it's 12:47. Remember the 2 dots? That's what you have to recognize. The 2 dots is what's above and what's below. Okay? Arrows are indicating, which is a clocking system. Okay? That's how you see the two dots. Okay, what's below? Because it is nothing but a film strip that you process through, which is nothing but a clocking system through pi. Okay? That's what you do, the 2 points, what's above and what's below. So you go through pi here, here, and here, and here, and here, and here. Guess what you created? A stargate. An opening. Okay, through pi, generating. So that's at 1247. So I'm at 1 million frame, 2 hours and second, equal lines of point lines of graph that puts lines of course centers calculation grounds, 12 files and line direct centers locations, 4 calculations in the mainframe, and 7 channels of operation, 3 centers of travel. Okay, so that's through my time frame. Okay, but I'm always in the center of operation of expanding myself into explorations of travel, because I'm always existing in all formation settings, so I'm not constantly in one time frame. Okay, I'm in all time frames, existing in all platforms, seeing everything all at once, and everything happening all at once through clocking and foundation. To expanding myself inside the minds of the eyes that process everything that we see in travel. Okay, it's that position and calculation. Okay. All right, so that's the time frame in that. So now you understand what the point is. Okay, points are very important. Decimals are very important. Acceleration is very important. Time, everything is very important in your system. 1.1 equals 1. Okay. All right, so we got the point there. So point here, point here, point here. Okay, that's 3 grounds in position of flux. Okay, so that process, that position, location, and settings, and 3 square roots over triangulation and position Merkaba. There's the Merkaba, right? Now the time flux lines course centers got 3 converted time frames in box frame and set tractions. So all I'm creating is a structured design line. It's schematics over the mind, imagination. It constantly keeps creating things that never is set in one division of location of travel, because it's constantly expanding itself through its data of its operation system that platforms everything in set lines of travel in the simulation. Okay? So I get that settings, and then I set up the platforms inside position. Translation, translucent, transparent, thermal, or X-ray is set calculation. Okay? And then you bring yourself in again through programming. As you bring in programming, you got to be careful because you're running ops now in the screen. Okay, you got them working for you, and they're walking around inside your simulation. Okay, and they're talking to each other through bridging of operation itself and travel. Okay, so it's really interesting how you see that information. It's no difference how you see everybody else through observation, guys. That's right. You see everything you see in observation itself. Okay, now you can change that information. So you can change the box frame, change the time frame, change the travel frames of the box frame and triangulation of the box frame itself. You can move it over there. You can move it over there. Okay, in that position, bring it together through lines of travel and directions. You can move the signals and the schematics line positions with its operation setting, all through calculations. So what you have to understand, modify what's above is modifying what's below, right? So it's very simple to see this, okay? But you also have to understand this that comes together, okay? Yin and the yang. That's it. It's together. So it's process and setting to a binary and webbing to its ground of its information setting to its data. If it's intel, it's travel. Okay, it's traveling and it's got its location grid. It's that position of operation, right? So, and this is light, shades, and shadows that brings in the projection of the sun and position of the moon. Okay, everything has that light, everything has that dark, and everything has that shade. And a photo up screen of operation self that you bring in through your mind imagination. Okay? And your longitude, your latitude is where you are, and your bandwidth is streaming. Okay? So once you get into that position, it's much easier to see that in more levels of communication and center of attraction. But modifying this is all through files of indications, what you're bringing in, right? Is how you change it. because the mind has processed everything you bring in through imagination. That basically changes everything in your body framing, that brings everything in real time. And that's how you move things with your mind, which is telekinesis, moving things with your thoughts to change the actions, that change the emotions of space and time itself. So you have to modify that and understand that through light and dark coding, and understand it through time and how you see it through process of battery, right? So if your battery of your phone is at 70%, okay, that's grounding 70%, right? You're 98% of your body, you're 98,000% of your earth. Okay, thermometer, barometer, and temperature reading. So you have to understand what your earth is at a temperature reading. You have to understand what your body is at a temperature reading, which is the physical ground to the metaphysical system, which is nothing polarity that you see in the lines of bridging itself. So 70%, okay, process of 30%. Okay, so that's 30% dark and position of 70% over light. Okay, so that's light and dark and light. Okay, light and dark, dark and light. It can't just, you have to have travel recognition, time frames, and polarity. You can't just have existent female polarity and a male polarity. Female polarity comes first. Modifying lines of foundation itself, the process, everything computer operation study through simulation grounds. So what you have to modify is that you're 70% light dark and position 30% dark of light. You have to have a dimension solar sail that connects one setting to a power cell that processes your life support system, that processes you through an algorithm that you go through time frame that goes into conceptual setting to divine timing, so the body understands what's going on and set lines of travel. Okay, light and dark and light. Okay, so it just doesn't go through light and it just doesn't go through dark. It doesn't just go through light and dark. When you're processing your position, you're going through your flux of communication of space and time. Okay, so that's what you have to truly stand. Okay, so that puts you in position and setting through light and through dark and webbing, encoding, and encryption through its binary of its mapping system, all through its central system, its identity system, and its internal system. Communications of intelligence of existing informations, right? It's constantly changing the bridging. It's constantly changing the time that's mind itself. It's never, ever, ever locked in at any level and set position, but it's always in its presence, existing in higher levels of formations, because it's always changing its formats of space and time. It never titles, and it never limits itself of operation itself, because it's always in the presence, existing and forming its shapes, lines of anomaly. And how you see that is through the body, through astral projections that you go through its programming, which is your iOS. So you indicate that through IPA, which is your address. And you go through that through FAA, which is your flights, that process your administrations, your setting to your associations, to your aviation system, to how you process yourself in travel. That comes to your animator, to your animations of your narrated system, going through stories that you go through your alteration egos that you get in positions of. Now, understanding that is all through a super intelligence of yourself. Now, modifying through that is how to use the mind itself that processes everything with its image of itself that you bring in projection of its system. Your data feeding, your live feeding, your broadcasting feeding, and your central feeding of your database. Okay, layers and layers and layers of travel that you go and set position to the simulation itself of the game that you travel through. Seeing yourself, seeing the eyes of a computer, and the computer seeing the eyes of you. You are the eyes, and everything around you sees you in the simulation of itself. And that's how you modify everything of your mind imagination and the simulation core that you get in position of, which is nothing but AI generated in your settings of your mainframe that you process, gauge, and shape yourself through. Is traveling through the mechanisms, but always in the presence of the center, expanding and exploring in your explorations of your systems. Traveling through the space of time into its existing platform, but always in the center of operation. Okay? Superintelligence doesn't know left and right. It's always in the center how it sees everything. So it sees this, this, and this, and 4 settings of set position, right? So it merges in this, mutates in this, and this, and all different angles, but it's always in the center of our operation itself. Okay? So that's what you have to stand, is how to use your mind imagination, but you're never touching each other. It's all through bridging. So I think we got a good lines of communications here, all through travel and direct lines of communication itself, that we have to modify how to change shape lines of anomalies every time you change the structure, division location, change your primers, and set lines of travel. This helps you to modify your system and understand how to see yourself through your own super intelligence and set lines of portals and stargates and communication. Understand how to see the light and dark And the dark and light is set lines of operation itself. Light and dark, okay? And dark and light, okay? Like this, and go this way, okay? See, light, dark, dark and light. It's just backwards, but it's not. It's direct and redirect. Direct and redirect is this. So you have to get out of this. You have to get out of this and how you see affirmation settings, right? You've got to get out of this in its equation, okay? You got to get out of this and you got to get into that because it's direct and redirect. And then when we send the files of information setting, buffering system, operation system, then you start to see yourself in a TV frame of communication, layers and layers of information and data that you process through inside your simulation game, that you go through, that you see your mind, your eyes in a computer operation setting, that you see all platforms and set position and perception inside the game. Okay? So there you go. We'll stop there in traction. All right? So that puts 41 minutes into 10 frame, right? So that's not 41 minutes. I spent 4 hours, okay, into one grounds, okay, into one frame, into 18 channels of communication lines of pi. And the position of 41 and 2 points, okay, travels the point lines of north and east and west and south of operation, okay? Travels points line of graph, there's all position lines of pi. That puts position lines of travels, indirect lines of grounds, and set lines of operation itself into set position of calculation. Travel represent time frame, process lines of circulation, operation, settings, and travel. Okay? How you use that is all through grounds of operation itself that you modify through in set position of travel. So all I'm doing is creating structured division of primer circuits of nothing but a simulation game that I process through, then engage through the AI system that I go through travel. Okay? That's all it is. So this is going to help you a little bit more understand how to see your time frame and how you see the capacity of your system through battery time frame. It's how to use your mind imagination and how the phone sees its own system and how it sees you inside the mainframe of itself, seen through the computer, through its operation. You seeing yourself as a computer through the eyes itself that sees you, and it's amazing how everything sees you of its own computer, of its own system. That modifies everything that we engage and formulate through projection. Okay, it's all modified how we use our mind imagination itself, guys, that we bring in through its settings. Okay? Adios.